In this section, we will look at vCloud connector, which in our environment and in the VMware vCloud Air environment is really the key to hybrid cloud computing. Earlier we saw the connectivity offered by the edge gateway and how we can connect up different cloud locations with virtual private networks. We saw that in the VPN section. Now we will look at the product called vCloud connector that allows us to actually create the hybrid cloud environment. So we will be in the lab, we will be looking at a private cloud running locally in my environment here, and connected up to the VMware cloud in Air cloud in Germany and in Virginia, and how using a single user interface we actually have access, and we can look across all of those entities. So a true hybrid cloud situation where you can move you can actually move different entities back and forth. So we are going to switch to the whiteboard before the lab, where I will discuss the terminology that I will utilize in the vCloud connector environment, as well as just the basic architecture of vCloud connector, so you understand what the various components are, and then we will switch over to the lab. The vCloud connector is an extremely powerful product, and I would highly recommend that you look at the VMware documentation for vCloud connector to be able to really understand in depth. In this section and in the lab, we will cover almost everything that is there to cover, except for the stretch deploy, which I do not have access to, but that is a very powerful feature, and although I will cover it in the whiteboard, I will not be able to show it to you in the lab. Almost everything else I will actually show you in the lab using the same environment that we have looked at previously, except that in this case we will not be logged in into vCloud Air user interface or into the vCloud directory user interface. We will actually be logged in into our local vCenter environment, and from there we will be able to manage all there is out on the cloud. So with that, we're going to shift to the whiteboard. So here we are at the whiteboard. Let me pick up some ink here in blue, and we are going to look at vCloud connector. But first, some terminology. So what we have had in place that we've looked at in our labs was the vCloud. This is a cloud. This is the vCloud Air environment. We had Virginia, and we had a site in Germany where we have set up organizations. We've set up virtual data centers, and we have set up catalogs, and from there we actually deployed virtual machines. So we have virtual machines running in Germany, and we have virtual machines running in Virginia. Now this was purely a public cloud environment, right? So these two sites, this is a public cloud, and this is also a public cloud. So it is more of a, I would call it a multi-cloud environment, not really a hybrid cloud, because a hybrid would be between a private site and a public site. So let me start again with hybrid cloud, and we will take a look at how vCloud connector fits the picture here. So with hybrid cloud, what we're going to do is this. We are still going to have the same vCloud Air environment. We will have Virginia, and we have Germany, DE, and I have a private data center. It is our INE-DC, which I will be showing to you in the lab. In this private data center, I'm actually running vSphere. Okay, and the key to it that this is private and this is public. Now, what I will be able to do using vCloud connector is to seamlessly look at my entire environment. So I will be able to look at this entire environment. I will be looking at my private environment and I'll be looking at my two public environments. And I would be able to look at this in one interface, and that is the key. vCloud connector will allow me to have, using one interface, a combined view of my private and my two public clouds. And it also allows me to do basic operations such as copying and deploying templates. There are some advanced features as well, which I will mention as soon as we start talking about vCloud connector itself, and we look at the architecture, we look at the capabilities of it first. But really, just to distinguish the hybrid cloud from the multi-cloud environment, the hybrid cloud in this case is a homogeneous combination of vSphere, in this case our private cloud, and the public clouds that are available there. Now, of course, the private cloud does not have to be a vSphere cloud. In the VMware world, it can also be a vCloud director implementation. That could be a private implementation as well. So you could have a vCloud director private implementation talking to any of these. Of course, that could also be in the mix here. So with that, let's start looking at the architecture for vCloud vCloud connector. vCloud connector is the product that allows us to see our hybrid cloud in one interface. vCloud connector has two components. One is the server component, so that is vCloud connector server, and there is a second component which is called a node. So these are the two components of vCloud connector. Both of these are appliances, and these appliances, as always, can be downloaded from VMware. Now, in the early days, this appliance used to come in two versions. It used to come in an advanced version as well as a standard version. But about a year ago, everything was combined into basically one version, and all the capabilities of the advanced version are now available. So you don't have advanced and standard anymore. I think the latest version is version something like 2.7.x. Is the latest version available for vCloud connector. vCloud connector should be mentioned here. Runs in a vSphere 5 environment, and the reason for that is that it uses the classic vCenter client. It does not use the new web client, and that's the C# client, as some people call it. So just remember that, because when we go to the lab, don't be surprised by seeing a vSphere 5 environment and a vCenter 5.5 there, within which I will be showing you the vCloud connector. What else? In terms of architecture, so those are the two components, server and node. The server connects up to a vCenter, and then the vCenter provides the user interface. It's in vCenter, in the solutions tab right at the bottom is where you will see the icon for vCloud connector showing up. So Before we go into the specifics of how to implement a vCloud connector and the steps one needs to follow, just to recap, vCloud connector is made up of two components, server and node, and it connects up to a vCenter. Now, just a word on the node before we shift gears. One node will support either a vSphere environment or a vCloud director environment. So there is a one-to-one mapping of this, which means that in a hybrid cloud environment, screen here, the way things are architected is that you have node Virginia, you have the node in Germany, and you have the node private, which I have running locally. And the nodes basically are talk to one another. So the node would talk like this. This node talks to the server that I have running locally. This is the connector server, and the connector server talks to the local vCenter, and the user interface is available up here in vCenter. Okay, so each cloud location requires one node to be set up. So I have to serve itself. So my node here basically is serving this, and then my node here actually talks to the various nodes up there. So really, we only have to deploy one node in each cloud location. So let's look at the architecture of vCloud connector. How we could actually deploy this. We have the Virginia and the German deployment, and then we have our own private vSphere environment. I will deploy connector server and a node. So one connector server and one node will be deployed in my private vSphere environment. There is a node already deployed by VMware in Virginia, and there is a node already deployed by VMware in Germany. And you have to get the addresses of those nodes, which we will get to in which we have just seen, or which we're going to get to in just a minute. And the environment is actually very straightforward. So I would simply have one connector server deployed, one node deployed, and then the connector server, as we said, would be connected to a vCenter, and then the UI is actually deployed out of that vCenter. So it's a very simple setup. The node here basically talks to these nodes like this. Okay, it's a two-way communication really, and the connector server simply manages the node, and then the connections happen between the nodes. When data is transferred, just an FYI, we're not going to get in any more detail, but again, you should really look at the vCloud connector documentation for details. Really what happens is, because these are vCloud director clouds, and this is vSphere, the format of the information is different. You have to import into vCloud director, and then there's an API for transferring entities between vSphere. There is actually in here there is some staging disk that is used. So really what happens is that you stage, it's picked up, and then it's staged, and then it's actually imported into the receiving environments. Before we jump into the lab, let's take a look at some of the capabilities of vCloud connector. So one of the key things it allows you to do is to actually, in the VMware environment, provide you the capability of the hybrid cloud, connect private plus public clouds. And in the lab we will connect our private vSphere environment to the public two environments that we have, one in Germany and one in Virginia in vCloud Air. And we will see that in one interface, and I think that's the key to it. You need to be able to see your entire cloud, regardless of whether it is private or public, not in independent screens or with independent tools, but in just one tool, and that's really what vCloud Connector allows you to do. The second thing is that it allows you to synchronize or keep in sync catalogs. So as we saw, we had catalogs in our public network, and there we saw that there were some templates that were available to us. Now the same templates should be available in all the various locations that make up the hybrid cloud. So even if we create templates locally in our private cloud, we should be able to upload those templates over to the public environment that we have access to. And the same thing applies if something is created or changed there. We should be able to bring that new template down into our local catalog so that the deployment can be seamless, and we can be sure that we're deploying exactly the same thing. So this is a capability, synchronization catalogs, that actually does that, and that's a really important aspect as well. Third thing is something called a stretch deploy. This is a very intriguing capability that we have with the vCloud connector, and what it does is that if you have your private cloud and you have the public cloud, and you have a virtual machine here. Well, when you move this virtual machine over to the public cloud, and it's now running here, what stretch deploy allows you to do is to actually keep the networking that has been associated with this virtual machine, even though the virtual machine is actually running up here. So what that obviously means is that the has to be a connection that is maintained like this, and basically it's a layer 2 VPN that is set up. So even though the virtual machine is running up here, its networking is reflected up here in the private side as well. And when you move the virtual machine back, there are some scripts to be run in order to bring it back in the same manner as it was working before. But this is a really nice capability. Layer 2 VPNs are useful, but again, as networking engineers know, we should really run it in a metro Ethernet environment, probably something that's really fast, because after all we are extending essentially a LAN over the cloud, so you can't have high latency and low speeds there. So probably good in a metro Ethernet environment. And another capability, it's a reasonably new capability, is that there are the actual data transfer capabilities have been enhanced. Multiple protocols are actually allowed now. You can use HTTPS, or you can use another HTTPS, or you can use another protocol. And really what that allows you to do is to use a checkpoint and restart also as part of the data transfer, so you don't have to start from scratch if the network goes down. So with this, we are going to move into the lab for vCloud connectors, so we can actually see these capabilities. I will not be able to show you the stretch deploy because I don't have that capability set up. It requires some extra prerequisites that I do not have in place. But everything else we should be able to show you in the lab. So here we are at the home page of the vSphere client in my local site. As you can see, in the Solutions and Applications tab, there is a new icon, vCloud Connector. So I've set up vCloud Connector. This vCloud Connector is running at this local site that I have, which is a vSphere site, and it is connected to vCloud Air in Virginia and vCloud Air in Germany, as I will show you shortly. The focus of the labs for vCloud Connector is going to be on the local site because that's where I'm running vCloud Connector, and I will be connecting to the nodes in Virginia and the vCloud Air nodes in Germany. So let's take a look at what happens here. I'll show you the end result first, and then we will go into what I had to do in terms of installing and configuring a vCloud connector to get to this point. And then we will actually use vCloud connector to see how we can move virtual machines back and forth, and how we can, from one location in a vCenter here, we can actually manage our hybrid cloud. So the key here is and how it is different from the virtual private networking sections that I showed you before, where I connected the Air Virginia site with the Air Germany site. That's actually a multi-cloud, in the sense that I connected a public cloud to a public cloud. Here I'm connecting a private cloud to the public cloud. So the private cloud is my local site. It's running vSphere, and I'm connected up to Virginia and to Germany using vCloud connector. So this is a true hybrid cloud environment with the ability to move virtual machines back and forth. So let's just take a overall look to see what we have in place, and then we will look at the next part of it, which would be the installation of the various components of vCloud Connector. We will then follow up with the configuration of the various components of vCloud Connector, and then we will actually operate vCloud Connector and see how we can actually manage a true hybrid cloud. So I click on vCloud Connector, and it gives me this screen. So up at the top, again, this is the old C# client. That's where vCloud connector actually works. So we have up at the top clouds, like in the other one, like in the on the other screens. You have data centers, and you have the vSphere vCenter itself. Here we have up at the top is clouds, and then you have the local node, and as you can see, the local node is actually a INE DC local data center. I'm connected up to the vCloud Air in Germany. That is my organization name in vCloud Director for Germany. There's a public catalog, as we all know, at every Air site. This is the vCloud Air in Virginia. That is my organization in Virginia. That's my UUID for the organization. There are default catalogs. I've set up a catalog in Virginia for this course, INE Catalog Virginia, and these are our two familiar data centers, INE VDC2 and INE VDC1. And of course, there's a public catalog in vCloud Air Virginia. So we're going to spend much more time going through the details of this, because I want to switch gears just a little bit and to the installation pieces, because we do need to do that. But the key here is that you can see that from this local site where I am, I have a vSphere client from which I'm managing the rest of my hosts and my clusters, and in that same environment I have a seamless integration with my hybrid cloud environment, which comprises my local private site and the public vCloud Air cloud. So we are back at the hosts and clusters screen. Let me just give you an idea of what I have in place here. So I have a ESXi server 192.168.0.200 that's running here. I have my vCenter server, a local vCenter server that I have set up, and then the two components of vCloud connector, which are the vCloud connector node local and the vCloud connector server local. I installed other components for different purposes, but for this exercise, for this INE course, we are going to use the vCenter server local, which is where we are at this point in time, and then the vCloud connector node local and the vCloud server local. Everything else is really the same here. I mean, if you are looking to open the console of this virtual machine, the console, is certainly available to you as well. There's a login. I can log into it as well, just like a regular machine, and so on. Nothing magical up here. Controlled out the cursor, alt the cursor out of it, and so we are back again. So again, the environment that I have locally is basically a vCenter server, which is managing the connector node and the connector server. This one locally. These are the virtual machines. So these are the only 3 virtual machines that I have up and running. So with that, what we're going to do is to go into File and deploy OVF template, because the first step is to deploy the various components, the vCloud connector node and the vCloud connector server. So I had earlier downloaded the OVFs, so this is the one here for that, and then when I click on next here, that's my vCloud connector server. I'm using the latest version that's available, 2710, and this is all straightforward. vCloud connector allows users to see VMs, apps, and templates across hybrid clouds and perform basic operations on those resources in those clouds, and that's exactly what we will be doing. So not going to spend too much time on this. We go next. We accept the license agreement, and of course then you have to provide a name for that machine. So we are just going to call it vCloud connector server test, and then it's going to be in this data center, local data center. I'll keep the options simple here. I can maybe just say it's okay till we take provision for now. It doesn't really matter. I have 2 networks in place. My connector components are connected to VM network 2, and that's connected to a VM NIC that is accessing the internet. So that's why I do that, and I'll show you the networking aspect of it as well. The default gateway would go something like this: 192.168.0.1. That's in my environment. We can use these name servers with a comma. For us, it's actually 8.8.4.4. These are the servers, as you know, name servers available, as you know, out on the network. You can use whatever name server that you need. We have 192.168.0.172, and that has a 24-bit mask. And then when I click next, this is what it actually looks like. So a very straightforward deployment of an OVF template. Okay, now I am not going to hit finish simply because I already have deployed the connector server node, the vCloud connector server local, and I'll log into the configuration for that in the next section of the lab. So deploying the template is very straightforward for a connector server. So I'm going to cancel out of this. I am then going to quickly show you what is needed to deploy the OVF template for the node, and that's my node. And again, the vCloud connector node, I have installed the latest version of that. That's version 271.0. There's a download size of about a gig and so on, and it's just one piece of the connector environment. Nothing magical here. It's extremely straightforward. vCloud connector node test. I have to change the name, otherwise it will complain, because I already have something like that in place. Again, thick provision, lazy zeroed is fine. I'm going to change the network because my VM network 2 is, as I said, actually connected to the internet, so that's why we do that. And I would have the same default gateway, 192.168.0.1 and 8.8.8.8, comma 8.8.4.4. Network IP address would be 192.168.0.173, and the net mask is a 24-bit net mask, so 255.255.255.0. When I hit next, I see the properties before deployment, and again, absolutely straightforward. I'm going to cancel out of this again because I already have my vCloud connector node local working, and actually just to let you know, I installed these nodes, both the server node and the connector node, with exactly these parameters, and you'll see that when we actually go into the configuration screens for those items. So I'm going to cancel out of this as well. Now, a quick look at the networking for those of you that may have an interest in this. So, configuration, networking. It's really very simple. This is what we are looking at. So I have a second standard switch, vSwitch 1, that I set up just for this course. I installed a vCenter server local. The node and the connector server are also running on this, and my VMNIC 1 is running at 100 megabits because that's the speed of the backend port on my router that is actually supported, but that's connected to the internet. My management network is on VMNIC 0. My management network is here, and that's my VM kernel port, VMK0, 192.168.0.200. So this is my management network, basically connected to VMNIC 0, and this is my standard switch and my connection to the internet. So a very simple setup here. Of course, in production it will be much more sophisticated, but really, in essence, that's all you really need. The idea is to show you that it is not a complicated process to set up the vCloud connector node and the vCloud connector server. So we are now going to switch gears since we understand how to install the OVFs and the various parameters the OVF installation requires.